Hi folks, hope you're well. I just looked at something and noticed something that was quite... Oof. When I saw it I thought, oh wow. The First World War ended in November 1918. The Second World War started nearly 21 years later. 21 years. That's basically enough time to grow more soldiers. Or enough soldiers for the next war. 21 years. Because obviously in the First World War, men were decimated amongst the world. The population of men was cut down hugely. But of course you needed time to, therefore, have more men or more males be born and to grow up strong enough to at least be used as fodder. Yeah, the weak ones you stick them right at the front. The ones that are of less value, they're not strong, they're not fast, they're not clever, so you stick them at the front. Yeah, I wouldn't be surprised in any way, shape or form if this wasn't a consideration for the people who were running the world at the time. Yeah, well, certainly the decision makers for the Second World War. But you think with regards to, let's say, when you look at the church now, yeah, if you look at the Pentecostal church then, or the big revival in the Pentecostal church, you're looking at about 1909 to 1915. So therefore, Smith Wigglesworth's ministry, just for example, the Pentecostal church in the UK and Europe really took off massively with Wigglesworth. And his ministry didn't start until around about 1913. So it would have been around about the time when his wife died. That's when really his ministry took off. It would have been just before, so let's say 1911. Okay. So the Pentecostal church was at its power just previous to World War One. Just a few years, really. So you had God bringing his new movement, which was the Pentecostal church, his new church, bringing back Pentecost, bringing back the Holy Spirit. And then the devil came in and said, right, okay. You think you're setting up a church? Okay, let's knock at that. And yeah, so we had the First World War. Yeah. And then very, very quickly afterwards, yeah, when it was now, nearly 21 years later, and males had been born 21 years before, or nearly about 20 years before, they're now old enough to be shot and killed. And to shoot and kill the enemy. So, yeah. Yeah. Well, the reality is we can look at our time and the time that we're alive. But as I say, if you want to understand why things are the way they are, with regards to the church, and with regards to anything else, you have to consider all of this. All of this. Yeah. The church, around about the time, well, the Pentecostal church, but therefore the church, was doing incredibly well around about the time of 1907, 1908, that sort of time. Certainly in certain areas, that revival that they had a revival then, and so, yeah. I think they had a revival about 1909 to 1915, and Smith Wigglesworth in the UK was a very, very big part of, spreading that around the UK and Europe. And so, yes, you had that point around about that time that, God brought it back to Pentecost and to what was there in the early church. And then within no time at all, that was there. And then by 1966, Times Magazine had done the article saying, "Is God dead?" Well, as I say, you had between the Pentecostal church being established and doing incredibly well, you had the First World War where there was decimation. Then you had a time period where there was a tiny bit of healing, but not enough, not in any way, shape or form. Less than 21 years later, the Second World War started, and the horror began again. And so the world had faced incredible horror. Okay. And that was for a long time, a very long time. We look at the First World War, the date, so that would have been 1914. So from 1914 to around about 1945. Over 31 years, really, of horror. And more than that, because obviously the rebuilding from the horror of the war, Second World War, will have taken years. So you're talking, 40 years of horror. And then you started getting rock and roll. So, but you also had that situation, well, as I said before, you had the women who during the Second World War had been going to work, and the men had come back from war. So the government's all said, right, men, go back to work, women, go back home and take care of your kids and all that. Be a mum, be a wife. And so therefore, the women and the men, none of them wanted to be where they were. The men didn't want to come back from a war after seeing their friends' brains being blown out, their stomach hanging out, all of that. Seeing mustard gas or whatever else gas being used. Yeah, maybe they were the ones who went into the prison camps and found the bodies of these Jewish people that had been gassed. You imagine going back and having to be a husband and a father after seeing horrors like that, where you can barely sleep because every time you close your eyes you just see that. So the children brought up in that time, they had a father who didn't want to be a father, didn't want to be a husband or a father, didn't want to do anything, just wanted to crawl up and die basically. But you had to be strong. Certainly in the UK you've got to be strong. And the mother, she didn't want to be just a wife and just a mother anymore, because she got used to actually going out and meeting with her friends and doing work and coming back home and feeling as if she's actually achieved something. So now she is resistant to her position as mother. She's offended by that. So the poor blinking kids, right? And so then you have rock and roll. Then you have this new way of living. It's freedom for women. And this peace and all of that. So of course people run to that, don't they? Then 1966, Times Magazine asked, "Is God dead?" Because young people left the church. They ran away from the church. Of course they did. The church was still at that point in time quite judgmental about sin. Yeah. Condemnation, about all that sort of stuff. And so therefore people ran away from that. And then, of course, the church at that time, you have to understand how difficult it was for them. With that question, is God dead? Did they want to be the church that killed off God in this world? No. And waiting for God, asking God about solutions and how to deal with things, you have to wait on his timing. So they went to the world. It's understandable. When you understand it, it's understandable. So consider that. You take care.